Okay, here with Tom Hooper, director of The Damned United. This is an exciting day for you, isn't it? This premiere, but up north this time.
Yeah, it's bringing the film back to its spiritual home. So it's great to be back here. Because obviously we filmed here. We used the real Ellen Road for Leeds United, and no, it's very special. And the fact that there are going to be players here tonight who actually played with Brian Clough during those famous 44 days is very exciting, if a little nerve-wracking.
Not least of which, Stuart Gray, who is Eddie Gray's son, who is playing Eddie Gray in the film. Was that a bit bizarre for him and you?
It was somehow reassuring, because when you were doing those scenes, to have someone who was so close to the process, someone who no doubt at night could ring up his dad and go, give me some feedback here, and it meant there was someone within the group who we could call on for our accuracy of what we're doing. I thought it was great.
Okay, and when it came to researching the film, had you read the book first? How did you come to be involved in the project?
My journey started rather incongruously in a Hungarian hotel bedroom. I was there filming the last stages of John Adams with Paul Giamatti and Laura Linney, with Tom Hanks producing, and Peter Morgan sent me this wonderful script, and I'd spent the day with the second president of the United States, who was this very ambitious but very self-destructive, brilliant but flawed man, and came home to read this screenplay about a gentleman called Brian Clough, who, let's just say, combines some of those leadership qualities. And I was hooked straight off. I mean, it was a brilliant first read. It was a brilliant first draft. I said to Peter, absolutely, I want to do it. I then went straight to the book and thought that was an amazing achievement that David Peace has created. So the two things combined, I mean, there was no doubt that was the next thing. So I went from this, crazy $100 million HBO miniseries and came home to Yorkshire to make this movie.
The book is very dark, I think it's fair to say, very inside Brian Clough's head. The mind of a genius, sometimes a dark place to be. Peter Morgan had to obviously lighten that up if this film was to have any kind of commercial attraction. Was that something you were aware of?
It wasn't, actually, interestingly, it wasn't a commercial decision. It was Peter and I, in researching our film, decided that there was a risk that the later Clough, the Clough after the tragic death of his assistant Peter Taylor, who was such a key collaborator, the Clough where his alcoholism clearly had come to the fore, there was a risk that the Clough that we had remembered from our most recent memory would overshadow the younger Clough. And this was, after all, a man who had his greatest managerial successes ahead of him with Nottingham Forest, who was a huge celebrity, was at the height of his powers. And I think we came to a slightly different conclusion about who this Clough was. I think the other thing is, like any comic genius, the voice inside his head may well be quite dark and quite troubled, but we're filming him in company, and in company one of his major weapons is his brilliant wit and his unpredictable wit, and so the film becomes funnier almost the moment you don't do the voice inside his head. And even a great movie like Saturday Night and Sunday Morning, which I watched and found inspiring, there's a little bit of voiceover of what's going on in Albert Finney's head, and then after 30 seconds they dispense with it. It doesn't really work well in cinema, so that created a change. I think the other thing is you kind of, I watched all 6 hours of the Red Riding trilogy, which was a really interesting watch, but you kind of, at the end of it, you think, well, if a 6-hour film about police brutality, police torture and police collusion in a paedophile ring has the same tone as a movie about Brian Clough, we've done something slightly wrong.
We talked about a similarity between another film that we saw recently, and that was Anvil, the story of Anvil, because we considered here was a film ostensibly about rock music, but it didn't matter that it was about rock music. Here is a film ostensibly about football and a football manager, but it's not necessarily a study of football and a football manager, is it?
I think that's the thing that attracted me, because I thought this is a film that can absolutely work for football fans, and fans of a certain age who have childhood memories or adult memories of this period will love it. But at the same time, as Brian Clough did, it transcends, being a movie about football. As Brian Clough, I think, transcended being a football manager and became a kind of national celebrity and part of the national conversation. And I was attracted because it explores the big themes. I mean, the themes of rivalry, professional jealousy, Don Revie versus Brian Clough, the theme of this wonderful, almost love story in this professional marriage between Brian Clough and Peter Taylor. And it's a story of hubris. It's a story of an egomaniac who thinks he does it all, who has to learn that actually he doesn't do it by himself. There's someone key to it, and that guy is Peter Taylor. And I think there's something in the wake of this kind of huge financial downfall we're in the middle of. There's something about a story about hubris that has a particular appeal, because we're all longing to see the bankers actually get down on their knees and say, I'm sorry, unfortunately they're not doing it very much, but there's certainly, it's in the climate.
And talking of the characters in the film, obviously you're now here in Leeds, and you will meet many of the characters. You mentioned you were pretty scared of that. What response of that? I mean, the response of the Clough family has been fairly well documented. I won't go into that, but the response from perhaps previous Leeds players, have you spoken to?
Well, we had. I mean, obviously in our research, we spoke to as many who were willing to speak to. I mean, I personally found Gordon McQueen and John McGovern very helpful, and I know that Paul Reaney and Peter Lorimer spoke to Peter Morgan, the writer. So we were as consultative as we could. And in some ways, the journey of the film for me, and I think talking to the Leeds players, made me realise that in some ways, it wasn't. I don't think it was really about them. It was about the mindset that Clough had come to Leeds with, and any guy taking on a bunch of superstars. I mean, there was the Irish captain, the Scottish captain, English internationals, and decides to accuse them all of cheating on his first day, clearly is taking a pretty high-risk strategy. And I think a couple of the players said to me, really, that was the moment it started to go wrong. That was the first day of training. And the film kind of says, well, how does this man get to the place where he cannot resist saying the worst thing at the beginning?
Okay, a final question from me then. It's the obvious question that pops up at the end of every one of these interviews. What do you hope people will take away from the film when they go away from The Damned United?
It's incredibly funny, and I think the great thing about seeing it in the cinema is that you get the experience of laughing en masse with 300 people as opposed to sort of by yourself with a DVD. I think it's also I want to make people laugh, but I want to break their heart. It's also very moving, and I think the surprising thing is that I think women can really enjoy the film as well as men because it is a story about relationships, and there is a great human drama as well as a great sporting drama.